What's up, my wizards? It's your friendly neighborhood dev here from Mtg. We like it of magic. Got some more of them Theros spoilers for you today. And for once, I feel like they didn't go all out. Kind of a chill day of spoilers, you know. I don't have to worry about my heart rate during this spoiler video for once. That's pretty nice. We just got kind of a nice laid-back day. We're going to keep it light, keep it tight, you know, and ride the tide today looking at some of these Theros spoilers. And there was some really good stuff, but we also got to see some kind of low-impact draft stuff and some low-impact reprints like Unknown Shores, Thrill of Possibility, Return to Nature, and all of these are going to be great in the limited environment especially. Thrill of Possibility is pretty decent in all of these decks that want you to cast spells on your opponent's turn. And then Return to Nature is obviously like main deckable in the limited environment, so it's not like these are low impact. They are really good reprints, but they were already in standard for the most part, so not too worried about it. Let's go ahead and move on to Hero de los Juegos, or Hero of the Games here. This is just a 3-mana 3/2 with the same sort of pseudo-heroic ability that we've been seeing on Boros creatures in this set. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, all your creatures get +1/+0 till end of turn. So it's one of those. I guess it's mostly decent. That's really all I got to say. So let's move on to Mischievous Chimera right here. I actually think this is pretty cool. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue, or 1 and a blue. It's a blue and a red for a 2/2 Chimera with flying. And whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, Chimera deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you scry 1. That's actually really good. Like, I don't know if it's standard playable good. A 2 mana 2/2 flying is decent stats, but you know, it won't get there on stats alone. The ability to deal an extra damage nearly every turn is really sweet if you're trying to count up to 20. And Scry 1 is not worth nothing. That's actually one of the better parts of the whole card. You get to fix your next draw. And you might be drawing more cards on your opponent's turn. You might be opting or Thrill of Possibility or something. So the Scry might be really important on your opponent's turn too. So I actually think this is really cool. I, again, don't know that it actually breaks into standard. But in terms of like limited playability, this thing is like a crazy bread and butter 2-drop for the deck that wants to play stuff on your opponent's turn. And that deck needed a strong 2-drop, and it definitely got it. So let's keep on keeping on. What do we want to look at next? I guess we'll take a look at Slaughter Priest of Mogis. Pretty metal name. It's just a black and a red for a 2/2 Minotaur Shaman. Each time you sack a permanent, Slaughter Priest of Mogis gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And you can pay 2 and sack a creature or enchantment. And Slaughter Priest gets first strike until end of turn, which isn't terrible as a sack outlet. I mean, you could do a lot worse. But again, I don't know if this really transcends into standard either. Honestly, there's just too many good 2-drops for the Aristocrats deck already. I mean, obviously there's Priest, but the deck just got another 2-drop the other day that gets counters whenever you sacrifice stuff. So I think that's probably better than this and easier to cast for what that's worth. And that's worth a lot in like a 3-color deck like the sacrifice decks often are. So I will say this is a sack outlet in and of itself, but it is a relatively expensive one for standard play. So I'm not entirely sure, but it does have this like massive threat of activation on it when it swings in. So, you know, it can get in for 6 damage like pretty easy with some open mana. So I think the card is actually really sweet in limited, but I think it's just like a hair off, just a tiny little smidge off of standard play, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. I could see playing, you know, 2 or 3 other, you know, 2-drops in place of this. So let's move on to Entrancing Liar. This is 3 mana for an artifact. You may choose not to untap it during your untap step. And if you pay X and tap it, you tap target creature with power X or less. It doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as Liar remains tapped. Now, I've seen some confusion about this. Somebody actually hit me up on Twitter earlier, too, saying, like, wait, is this card busted? No, it's not. It's not busted in the way you want it to be. No matter which message board you go to, there's going to be somebody asking if this basically means you can keep like a bunch of different creatures tapped down over multiple turns, and you can't. The way the rule works is as soon as this untaps for any reason, it stops affecting the creature that it's affecting at that moment. So, you know, if you untap this some way or another, and then you use it to tap down another creature, then the creature you initially tap down does not stay tapped down when it comes to your opponent's next untap step. So that kind of sucks, but I guess you can keep it, you know, you can use it to keep 2 creatures tapped down at one time effectively for at least 1 turn so you can get a decent attack step in. You know, whatever it was affecting, you can untap it, and that creature will still stay tapped until your opponent's next untap step. So you can tap down another creature on your turn and then swing in, and you've effectively eliminated 2 of your opponent's creatures from combat. So I actually don't think it's bad at all for limited. I don't think it goes anywhere outside of that format. But in limited, this is effectively like a removal spell, albeit a slow one, but it's a removal spell that any deck can play. That can switch targets as the game goes on. So that's just very, very good in sealed specifically. So I expected to make a good little splash in that format, but not really do too much outside of that. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to Nessian Wanderer here. This is a card that got me excited until I got to the very end of the text box. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 1/3 Satyr Scout with Constellation. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a land card from among them and put that card into your hand. But you got to put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. I was really hoping that this would be a take on various other 2-mana satyrs that we may have seen in the past, and this would put the cards in your graveyard whenever it triggered, because that would be really exciting. But no, you just put them on the bottom of your library. But still, this does just get you like free lands whenever you cast an enchantment, and that's really good for just 2 mana. Like, this is just card advantage. Maybe it's what was the thing from the last set? It just rotated out. I think it was in Dominaria, but it was Tinder. What was it called? Green Seeker. I think that was right. Dryad Green Seeker. The thing you tap, and if the top card of your library is a land, you put it in your hand. That thing saw like some sparing play, and this could be at least as good or better than that some of the time. Although that was just a tap, and this is, you have to build your entire deck around it. So, I'm not too sure. But like I said, again, in Limited, this is a fantastic card, at least. But we'll see. We'll see if it transcends out of that format, because it very well could. But let's move on here to Acolyte of Affliction. This is a card I'm kind of excited about. This is 4 mana, 2 a black and a green for a 2/3 human cleric. And when it ETBs, you put the top 2 cards of your library into your yard. Then you may choose a permanent card from your graveyard and put that card into your hand. So obviously kind of reminiscent of like a Golgari Finebroker, but the stat line is 1 PT lower on both ends. But that's actually worth it, considering this is like so much easier to cast than a Finebroker, and it puts some cards into your graveyard too, which is actually really sweet, depending on what kind of deck you're playing. Like, I've said a couple of times this previous season that sometimes this can be like drawing cards, and I've caught a little ire for that. But again, like, if you have a way of getting those cards out of your graveyard, whether it's Jumpstart, Escape, Reanimation, Gutter Bones, whatever, if you have a way of getting those cards out of your graveyard, then an ability I said my heart rate wasn't going to get too high for this video, but I'm tripping over myself. An ability like this can be like drawing the cards if you have access to them once they're in your yard. So just the put 2 cards from your library into your yard could actually be much, much better than anything Finebroker does, but still returns a permanent, and that's all you want. So maybe you just play this in the same deck as Finebroker. You play 8 Finebrokers, and then like nothing will stay in your graveyard for too long. But sweet, sweet limited uncommon right here, and it might even break into standard depending on what we see, because that is a really good ETB trigger. But I'm gonna go ahead and move on, because there's really not like that much to the card, right? So let's talk about Hateful Eidolon. This is a black mana for a 1/2 enchantment creature. It's a spirit with lifelink. And whenever an enchanted creature dies, you draw a card for each aura you controlled that was attached to it. That's good. Like, that's honestly a 1 mana 1/2 lifelink. Not terrible on stats alone, but that's not going to get you very far. It's still a decent stat line, though, for the mana cost. And it has the enchantment creature type. That's worth a little bit of extra love here in this upcoming standard, so that's cool. And I really, really love the actual meat of the text box here, because, again, we're seeing a few cards that are trying to like break the rules of why auras are unplayable. And this is definitely going a long way, because, it's just insurance, effectively. You don't get 2 for 1 if a creature with an aura dies. And that's really, really worth something. And if they want to keep that from happening, they have to point removal at Hateful Eidolon, which means they're not pointing removal at the creatures you have that have auras on them. So, honestly, all in all, I think it's a sweet little creature that can be a great 1-drop in any sort of, enchantress-based deck. I will say, this could also go in a more black-based enchantments deck that's playing like Dead Weight and stuff like that. What's the other one? Mire's Grasp, that gives a creature -3/-3. Because it's not like whenever an enchanted creature you control dies. It's just whenever an enchanted creature dies. So if you stick a Dead Weight on something and it dies because of that, you draw a card, which is crazy too. So this could go in a couple of different kinds of decks. But if there is like a green-black auras or enchantments deck, this is obviously going to be your 1-drop, and it's just so cool. I really like this thing. I don't think that it's like super impactful, but I will say it's one of the cards that I like the most on the day. Even if it's not one of the most powerful things, it does really facilitate a lot, and it gets going in the early game, so sweet little card. And it blocks a whole bunch of stuff too in the early game for what that's worth against like mono red. So cool little card. But move on to Plague Breath Catoblepus. We've seen a bunch of Catoblepus in the past. That can't be how you pronounce it. But I've never really figured out how to pronounce it. So, a Plague Breath Cat. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 black for a 3/2 beast. And when it ETBs, target creature an opponent controls gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is your devotion to black. This might be the best black common in the entire set. I really want to point out that this is a common. So even though the stat line isn't great for how much you're paying, I mean 6 mana is an awful lot, and I wouldn't play more than like 2 of these in most limited decks. But especially in sealed, at the pre-release, this is just a freaking premium common that's at least going to give a creature -2/-2, but is often going to give a creature like -4/-4, -5/-5. Like it's just always going to kill something when it ETBs, so it's going to be worth the 6 mana. It's limited. When it comes to that format, removal's just always at a premium, and removal on a body is always good. So this is just a sweet little limited common here that you're going to be looking for at your pre-release, and I wanted to point it out. But move on to another piece of removal here, Heliod's Punishment. This is 1 and a white for an enchantment. It's an aura, and it enchants a creature. Heliod's Punishment enters the battlefield with 4 task counters on it. Enchanted creature can't attack or block. It loses all abilities, the most important relevant line of text on the card. It loses all abilities and has tap. Remove a task counter from Heliod's Punishment. Then, if it has no task counters on it, destroy Heliod's Punishment. So, this is actually kind of good, I think. I mean, it's obviously limited removal you're going to play all the time. I don't like that, obviously the creature has a clock that lets it get rid of punishment. But, at the same time, it loses all abilities. It also can't attack or block, so this is just a pacifism take, and like pacifism's a good card, especially in limited, but I'm talking about constructed now, where making a creature lose all of its abilities for like minimum 3 or 4 turns is quite good. That could open up a fairly large window to let you just basically win the game. If you invalidate their questing beast or something for a couple of turns, that might be all you need, but this also buys you the time to get to a sweeper, right? Because if you just play Heliod's Punishment on like turn 2 or 3 on a smaller creature, then it turns out that they're not going to be able to get rid of Heliod's Punishment by the time you cast a 5 mana Wrath, or even a 4 mana Wrath, which we got a new one today. We'll talk about it towards the end of the video, but again, this just buys you time till you get to a Wrath, and it triggers any, stuff that plays off of enchantments, or auras for that matter, like Hateful Eidolon. So, this could actually be a really, really sweet piece of removal. Only costing 2 mana is good. We've got other stuff that only costs 2, like Pacifism, which lasts forever, or like Glass Casket. But I think this might be worth a shot. At least trying it out in some decks. It's not good over the course of a long game where you don't have other forms of removal, right? But if you can close the window before they get their creature back, or if you can get to a sweeper before they get their creature back, I think there's a good argument for this card. And, most white decks that would play this card can do one of either of those things fairly easily, I would think. So I do like the card, but time will tell whether or not it's good. I think the ability for your opponent to just get rid of it is obviously a huge downside, so we'll see if it's too big of a downside moving forward. But anyway, moving forward is what we're going to do next. Let's look at Relentless Pursuit. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a sorcery. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a creature and or a land card from among them into your hand. Put the rest into your graveyard. So you got kind of like a green divination kind of thing that can draw you 2 cards, and very often will draw you 2 cards, because these are going to be the most, the types of cards that you're playing the most, or creatures and lands. So it's going to be fairly easy for this to draw you 2 cards. Is that good enough in Standard? Maybe, if you can get the total value out of the fact that you're putting the other 2 cards into your yard. It's entirely possible, too, that you just put all 4 cards into your graveyard. You have the option to do that because this is a May ability. So you don't have to put anything in your hand, but that's probably where the card is at its floor, right? So I don't want to talk about that too much. But if you do just want to fuel graveyard strategies, fuel escape, you have the option to put all 4 cards in your yard. But just being able to put 2 in your yard to fuel escape, or maybe put an escape card in your yard to begin with, and then get 2 cards in your hand is like massive card advantage is what it feels like. So this is almost certainly playable at some level in Constructed, although 3 mana is an awful lot to ask. But again, if you can get the entire value out of this, then I could definitely see it being worth 3. But again, in terms of limited, this might be one of the better commons in the entire set. Because again, you got to point out that it's common. It's going to be fairly easy to get your hands on a copy of this in limited. So I could definitely see this being, again, just a bread and butter card for certain kinds of decks to want to play. So huge fan of that. I wish it also worked, to put enchantments in your hand. But very often putting a creature in your hand is going to be putting an enchantment in your hand in limited. So keep that in mind. But in any case, what are we moving on to? What's next, everybody? I should really figure this out before I start the video. Let's look at Heliod's Intervention. This is 2 white and X. For an instant, you choose 1. Destroy X target artifacts and or enchantments, or target player gains twice X life. So, I don't think that it's great. Gaining twice X life at instant speed could be okay, but you're not affecting the board in any way. Usually these gain X life spells aren't usually great. We just had God, what was it? Sanguine Sacrament in the format a little while ago. It's all no play whatsoever. But this does have the ability to affect the board by just getting a bunch of garbage off of it, including creatures in the form of enchantment creatures. So this is just probably a limited bomb because it's going to remove 3 or 4 permanents late in the game. So you definitely want to play it there in your main deck. But as far as standard goes, this is probably more of a sideboard card, although it does chip away at specific decks. You could kill both Oven and Trail of Crumbs. Not to mention any other ancillary stuff. You can kill a bunch of food tokens too against the food decks, the sacrifice decks. So that might be decent to sideboard. This can also kill, Fires of Invention and possibly another enchantment or 2 that are on the battlefield, depending on what direction that deck goes. So it could see a lot of sideboard play. And 2, this could kill stuff like if they Dance of the Manse, for instance. Then you could, at instant speed, kill 5 of the things that just dance back into play if you have enough mana. And you probably do at that point in the game if they're able to cast Dance, for the full value. So you just respond by blowing up everything they just danced into play, and then what are they going to do, right? So I think that's there's definitely some really good uses for the card in the format right now, but I don't think it makes it much more than a sideboard card. But it is kind of the ultimate sideboard card against those decks. So probably will end up seeing some play, but I just can't get as excited about it as I've gotten for the other interventions, because the other interventions seemed main deck playable, and this could be in a certain format. Maybe we're there. I'm not 100% sure, but it could be. It could get there in a certain format. I find it hard to get that excited about. One thing that I was really excited about though was Wolf Willow Haven, which sounds like a show on the CW or the WB. Now back to Wolf Willow Haven on the WB. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for an aura that enchants a land. And whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional green. Yay, it's one of these. You can pay 4 and a green and sacrifice Haven to create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. You can activate its ability only during your turn. So I actually really like this a lot. I like Wild Growth. I love Wild Growth so much. And even though this costs more than Wild Growth, it's still reminds me of Wild Growth, and it's really, really good in this format because we have Nissa, right? So you can just tap a land for 3 mana, and then untap it with Nissa and tap it for 3 mana again. That just it seems real specifically good, but either way, even if we didn't have Nissa in the format, it'd be a good card. It's kind of like Rampant Growth a little bit. It doesn't go search up a land or anything, but it's still a 2 mana accelerant that's really hard to deal with, or at least much harder than a creature would be to deal with. I really, it also goes with any enchantment strategies, obviously, so it's a great 2-drop aura for the enchantress decks. Just a fantastic card, in my opinion, and if it ever, outlives its usefulness, or you need a mana sink or something to do on your turn, then boom, becomes a 2/2. I wish you could do it at instant speed so that you could do it on your opponent's turn when they attack or something, but it's really not that much to ask. Sorcery speed's not a huge, detractor on this. I'll still take the fact that this will trigger any aura strategies and ramp you, but when you don't need it anymore, boom, you get a 2/2. You can even tap the land that it's on to create more mana, so it kind of really only costs 4 mana, right? to activate and then sacrifice it. So it also counts as sacrificing a permanent for any things that want to sacrifice permanent, right? So Corval, Mayhem Devil, whatever this works for. So there's so much that I like about it. I'm not saying it goes in any of those decks on day one, but this is really difficult for your opponent to deal with ramp. That also goes with any enchantment strategy, so I just love it. I'm completely in love with the card. I'm not going to get super excited or anything. It's not like a chase rare, obviously, but it is a really, really sweet card that we don't really see too much of anymore, to be honest. Often these effects will cost 3 mana, so just this costing 2 mana is kind of a big deal, but I'm going to go ahead and move on here to Tama Tersh of Many Faces. This is a 2-mana 1/1 human wizard with Constellation. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Tama Tersh of Many Faces become a copy of target creature and gain this ability. By the way, I will die on this hill. It is a hard T. It's not Tama Tersh, Tama Tersh. It's how we've all said it since I was 10 years old. But maybe I'm just a boomer. Anyway, Tama Tersh of Many Faces is a really exciting card. It really is. You know, there's so much cool stuff you can do with it. But what I want to do is, you know, copy a Titan or something. Because if you play a Titan, and while it's, you know, sacrifice this, if you didn't escape it, while that ability is on the stack, you can flash in an R, you flash in an Omen or something, and once that resolves, boom, you just turn your Tama Tersh into one of the Titans. And it'll stick around on the battlefield because it didn't enter the battlefield. You know, that's kind of the only bad thing about the card, is that Tama Tersh can't copy ETB triggers. It won't get them, but it can copy Titans, and that's pretty sweet. It can also copy your opponent's creatures, which might be important. You know, copy a Lovestruck Beast or Questing Beast or something like that, or copy a Rotting Regisar with your 2-mana thing. That could be really sweet, especially if you, like, you know, play a Banishing Light. You know, you play this on turn 2, play Banishing Light on turn 3, get rid of one of your opponent's creatures, and just copy another one of them. Seems pretty decent in a lot of, you know, on a lot of board states. So I think the card is pretty cool. I'm not sure that Enchantress decks really want it. It is a little awkward to actually proc the card. You know, Constellation looks really easily, but when we're looking at these blue-based decks, I'm just not sure how great it is. I will say, however, that this can copy all kinds of crazy nonsense once you do get popping off with it. And, you know, turn 2 this, and like turn 3 Setessan Champion. Play an enchantment, draw a card, and turn this into Setessan Champion, so you'll start drawing 2 cards. Seems really good, but also seems a little difficult to set up. So I'm just not really sure that the card goes that many places in Standard at the end of the day, but I do think that this is one of those where you're like, you got to get into brew mode and like really look at all the options and stuff, you know. So I think it's cool. Obviously works with enchantment creatures. So you play a creature, you can turn this into the creature you just played. A lot of cool stuff. But is it any of it like powerful enough to really put this at, you know, on any of the top tables in Standard? We'll have to wait and see about that. But it is one of the cards that I'm kind of most excited to brew with at the end of the day. So I guess we're almost done for the day. I do want to take it back to yesterday for a card that I missed, and that's Agonizing Remorse. I actually recorded a bit for this card, but I kept saying Thought Seize instead of Thought Erasure because I'm an idiot, so I've got a tumor or something, I'm not really sure. But I had to cut the bit because it was just, I said Thought Seize like 4 times when I meant Thought Erasure. It was really bad. So Agonizing Remorse, however, is 2 mana, 1 and a black for a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it or a card from their graveyard. Exile that card, you lose 1 life. So the argument is this better than Thought Erasure. There, I said it right. It's not better than Thoughtseize. Is it better than Thought Erasure, though? I think that actually there's a great argument this is better than Thought Erasure. It's almost never going to whiff. You know, sometimes you play Thought Erasure and your opponent just has a couple of lands in their hand. Feels kind of bad. You still get the Surveil, and that can be okay. But then other times, you know, Thought Erasure is a really bad top deck. Your opponent doesn't have any cards in their hand. Even then, you might take their Surveil, don't get me wrong, but you just don't get the full value for 2 mana. It feels bad. This is a much better top deck than Thought Erasure could ever hope to be. And it's more easily castable than Thought Erasure. Even in decks that do have access to blue mana, it's still easier to cast than Thought Erasure. So you got to give it that. You also exile the card, which Thought Erasure doesn't do, and that is huge in a format full of, you know, Jumpstart and Escape and Reanimation. Even there's all kinds of stuff people are doing out of their yard. So exile is just an enormous clause. You know, we just saw the new mono red Phoenix that people are going to probably be trying to play. This gets rid of the Phoenix too. Just again, all kinds of reasons why exile is an incredibly relevant clause. So I'm not ready to just categorically say this is better than Thought Erasure, because there are going to be a lot of situations where Erasure is better. Surveil is really, really good, so don't get me wrong. But just the fact that this will literally just about never whiff, almost always find a target and exiles, those are huge points in its favor. So you might even play basically 8 Erasure. You know, you play 4 Agonizing Remorse, 4 Thought Erasure in some decks, and that could be really good when followed up with like a Davriel or something. So I don't know. I think the card is great and could see day 1 Standard play, but if we have to wait till Thought Erasure rotates, we still have a piece in the format when Erasure does rotate that is just as good or in some cases better than Erasure. So huge fan, in case you wanted to know how I felt about the card yesterday. But we are down to 1 card left, and you know what it is. So let me reload Mythic Spoiler to make sure that nothing else got dropped in the last 20 minutes? Nope. Everything looks good. So let's look at it, everybody. Here's Shatter the Sky right here. 4 mana, 2 and 2 white for a sorcery. Each player who controls a creature with power 4 or greater draws a card. Then destroy all creatures, which is the most relevant line of text. I've seen some people misread this. Excuse me, I had to cough. In a number of ways today. First of all, the weirdest misread is that people somehow think this is like a citywide bust, just destroys stuff with power 4 greater. No, it destroys everything. Destroy all creatures, the most relevant line of text. But the other misread, that's a little bit more understandable, is people thinking that your opponent's going to draw multiple cards off of this. No, they can only ever draw 1 card. Each player who controls a creature with power 4 or greater draws a card. So even if they have Questing Beasts and 2 Love Strucks out, they still only draw 1 card from this. So this is very good. I've seen all manner of takes on it today, but for the most part, the competitive community on Spikes is convinced this is a good card, and I am right along with them. It seems as though the fact that your opponent's going to sometimes, not all the time, just sometimes draw 1 card off of this seems to be putting a fair amount of people off of it, and I don't get it. It's still going to be on a lot of boards at least a 2-for-1, if not a 3-for-1, even if your opponent draws the card. All depends on how many creatures they have. This is just so much better than something like, Time Wipe, although you'll probably still play Time Wipe in the blue-white control decks. It's just great for those decks to now have access to a 4-mana Wrath. It's a little bit more fair, but it's still a 4-mana Wrath. And there are so many games where just like, you die before you get to Time Wipe. You die before you get to your 5th land drop. You die before you get to that blue source or whatever that you need. So there are just so many times where a 4-mana Wrath, even one that draws them a card, is going to allow you to not die, which is what Wraths are there for. Wraths are there so you don't die, and sometimes a 5-mana Wrath just isn't that good in a lot of situations. So just having access to a Wrath of God, a 4-mana destroy all creatures effect, is going to be good enough for this to see some amount of standard play. But I've only talked about control decks up to now. There's obviously the Gideon deck, is like the most talked about thing all day. So I guess I'll touch on it here. Not only do we have Gideon in the 3-drop slot, but we also have Taranika now, which can turn any creature effectively into a Gideon during our attack step. So, Shatter the Sky means that we can, say, have a Gideon out on turn 3, play Shatter the Sky 4, bust the entire board open, keep our Gideon out, and draw a card, which is a stupid playline. That is a very disgusting playline. Plus, on turn 2, you have creatures like Tithe Taker, for instance. So you play Tithe Taker turn 2, and then turn 3, you either play Taranika, and then on your next turn Tithe Taker into an indestructible 4/4, right? Or if you don't get Taranika, then you can still Shatter the Sky and get an Afterlife token out of your Tithe Taker. So there's a ton of lines you could take with this card that allow you to play creatures and still get huge benefit out of it, especially when it comes to Gideon. So I think that's probably going to at least try to be a deck. We'll see how powerful that is. If you don't get Gideon or Taranika plus 2-drop into Shatter the Sky, the deck might be fairly bad, but there's still there's options for mono white. At this point, we just saw the 5-mana saga the other day, Elspeth beats death or whatever it's called, Elspeth conquers death, and that could go really well in a mono white mid-range deck. So there's just all kinds of shells that you could throw Shatter into, whether it's control or again mono white mid-range. This is a really interesting card because it gives these mid-range decks a way to have a sweeper that they kind of don't mind playing, whether it's because you draw a card or because you have indestructibles out, one way or the other. Same thing with gods. This is a little awkward with gods, by the way. Although I will say, if it's worded in exactly the right way to if you have a Heliod turned on, then this will draw you the card before you wipe all the creatures, and Heliod isn't a creature anymore. So that's also worth noting. But it might be really tough to turn on Heliod by the time you get to Shatter, if you're playing it on curve. So you got to point that out too. But still, one way or the other, you still Shatter and have a Heliod out, and you'll be able to rebuild your board pretty easily on the next turn. One would hope turn on your Heliod again. So just another angle you could take on Shatter. I just don't see a world where this doesn't see some amount of standard play. You could say, Deafening Clarion might be a better sweeper because it's at 3 mana. Even the new red sweeper at 4 mana, Storm's Wrath, might be better than this. But this is going to clean up a bunch of creatures that Wrath doesn't. Things like Rotting Regisaur, Lovestruck Beast. And again, you'll be happy to kill those creatures. Right? If your opponent has a board with 3 knights and a rotting Regisaur, let them draw the card. It's fine. You'll not die if you play Shatter. So that, yes, do it. So again, I just don't see a world where a 4-mana Wrath that's unconditional. We talked about the red Wrath a second ago. That's conditional. It doesn't kill Lovestruck Beasts. It doesn't kill, rotting Regisaurs. And that could make all the difference in this standard. This is completely unconditional. So again, even if your opponent draws a card, they're still going down on cards. Because, you killed 4 creatures. You spent 1 card. They got 1 card back. Well, you're still up in cards. So Shatter is a very good looking card to me. It's obviously not Wrath of God. It's not Damnation, but they're not going to reprint those cards. They're just not going to. So this is as good as it's going to get. But as far as that's concerned, I think it's a great card. So I really have no real problems with it. And obviously, the first thing you want to do is build some kind of Gideon-centric deck, and we are going to do it. So in any case, I'm pretty sure that is it for today. There were some cards to get really excited about. Let me know how you feel about Hateful Eidolon, the black 1-drop for Enchantress decks. I think that's really good, especially considering, Deadweight, Mire's Grasp, all that. I'm getting excited about it. My mouth is watering. Is Heliod's Punishment just a really bad pacifism, or is it a really good pacifism? Let me know. Shatter the Sky, how do you feel about it? Did I fail to convince you? That's entirely possible. Relentless Pursuit. Is that a decent enough piece of green card advantage to maybe break into standard depending on the deck? Wolf Willow Haven. Is that as good as I want it to be? There's all kinds of stuff to talk about. You got any combos with Tama Tersh of Many Faces? Do you? I want to know them down there in the sideboard. Get to the comments section. Let me know how you felt about all the takes today and all the cards and what you're most excited to do, because we're coming up really soon here on Deck Tech season. It will not be long before we start really biting into this set and seeing what we could do with these cards, because there's a lot of power here. So just let me know what you're most excited for. And of course, if you want to help determine what decks we really do next, then you can just join the Patreon. $1 a month is all I ask. I'll let you vote on what decks we do all Deck Tech season long. So get in there, go to the link in the description, and also go to TCG Player. Pick up any of these pieces, singles or sealed product, at the lowest prices on the whole dang old interweb. Subscribe to the channel. I was trying to get to 117,000, but for some reason I've lost some subscribers in the last couple of days. Help me make those up. Maybe it's because I'm not showing my face during spoiler season this time around. Maybe it's because my takes have been bad to some people. I'm not sure. Usually I gain subscribers during spoiler season though. But anyway, help fix that by subscribing to the channel. If you haven't done it yet, hit the bell for notifications and like the video on the way out. You can also follow me on Twitter at SBMTG Dev, and my pitching is over for this video. So I guess I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.